Lions favored by 3 in Minnesota.
Yeah, this is an interesting game for that. We had an email complaining that I keep referencing this game from last year, but the game last year where Ben Johnson was just destroying Ed Donatel and was ahead of him, all the way through the game. Very different dynamic this year. Now you've got Ben Johnson, still one of the best offensive coordinators in the NFL, going up against Brian Flores' defense, which has done the inverse of that to teams this year, where they've been a step ahead and they've caused offensive problems. So, what does that look this time around? I think that's a really fun matchup because can't say enough good things about what Flores has done to that defense, which personnel-wise still isn't great. I mean, you look at what they are bringing to the table, certainly on the defensive line outside of Donnell Hunter. Linebacker, it's Hicks and it's Ivan Pace Jr., who's an undrafted rookie who is still pretty limited in terms of what he can do. He's not a complete linebacker right now, and they're still making that work. It's the 3 safety thing. It's cornerbacks who none of them look like impact playmakers right now. And somehow that's all coming together to produce a top 10 caliber defense that's a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks and coordinators to deal with. So, I think Flores is assistant coach of the year right now and going up against one of the best in the game in Ben Johnson and that Lions offense.
What I'm curious about is when you're a defensive coordinator, how did they land at this strategy? And if we break down the strategy as they rush 6 more than any team in the league, as you've laid out, right? They rush 6 more than anybody and rush 3 more than anybody. Because it's do you sit down on paper and say, okay, these are 2 extremes that we want to push toward? Because what it does is it makes the offense, this is what I think is genius about it, is it makes the offense react completely differently. So when you have to face a blitz, whether it's 5 or 6, you immediately have to have an answer. You have to have a blitz answer and get rid of the ball quickly. When there's a 3-man rush, I think the mistake a lot of quarterbacks make against a 3-man rush is when they get rid of the ball too quickly. Because a lot of times against a 3-man rush, the best strategy is actually holding the ball and maneuvering the pocket and finding you have 2 extra escape routes essentially from the pocket, and you have more room to maneuver. So you're better off against a 3-man rush actually taking your time, not really hitting something in rhythm unless it's just wide open. But you don't have to hit anything in rhythm. You take your time, you wait for the coverage to break down, and then you hit a pass, especially in the red zone. 3-man rush in the red zone, you just kind of wait for coverage to break down. So you're essentially making the quarterback do 2 extremes. 6-man rush, you get rid of the ball. You have to get rid of the ball quickly. If you don't, you're in trouble. 3-man rush, you should take your time. And so you're making them work at those 2 extremes. And most rushes are 4 or 5, right? They're in the middle. And so now the Vikings are making quarterbacks do opposite ends of the spectrum, and they disguise it all, and you don't know when it's going to hit. I think that's just genius overall. And was that the...
You know what it's like?
What?
It's like, it feels like pitching in baseball, right? Where you get them used to the fastball, and then you hit them with the changeup.
Changeup.
And then they swing too quick. They're too fast. They're too ahead of it.
Look at you. Yeah. Good job. Brian Flores is Greg Maddux.
So he sends him. He's throwing 95 the whole time, right, or whatever an actual fastball is these days. Yeah. 6 guys the whole way. So you speed up the process. You're like, panic, got to get rid of the ball, and then you keep dropping in the coverage every now and again, and their process is too quick. They're getting rid of it. They're throwing it to places they shouldn't, and that's where all the mistakes come from.
We're getting at something here. Because look, when we would talk about pitching, Sam, the 3 ways you can mess with the hitter are throwing the ball in and out, opposites, up and down, and then there's the front and back component. That's the changeup, right? You mess with their timing front and back. When defensive coordinators disguise coverage, a lot of times it's too high safety and roll to 1, or vice versa, right? Because that changes your reads, it changes the side of the field that you're going to, it creates some indecision. Is this a newer way of messing with the quarterback, which isn't like, here's the different read, we're going to make you the safety rotation. We're actually going to, this is your change up, which is making you speed up or slow down your process based off what we do. It's just fascinating to me.
And the fact that it's 6 is so important because 6 is generally the number that you're not going to be able to pick up easily.
So it has to come out quick.
Yeah, if you're
not going to block it up.
Yeah, if you're just rushing 5, theoretically you have that picked up most of the time, right? Whether it's the 5 offensive linemen and you have the protection call correctly, or having a running back there to check before he releases, even if he's out in the pattern, most of the time you are able to pick up 5 if you have a vague idea of where it's coming from, right? or even just the general idea that it's coming in the first place, which you will have when, guys are all stacked to the line of scrimmage the way the Vikings do. When it's 6, you might not have the capacity to pick that up, which means the extra guy is hot, right? The quarterback is now responsible with getting for that guy, which means the ball has to come out quickly. And if that guy isn't actually rushing, now you're trying to get rid of the ball quickly to the place you shouldn't.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating strategy to me. I think it's something to think about, and I'm just curious if they landed at it with intention. If it's like, hey, we're gonna on half of our defensive snaps, we're gonna work with these extremes here. From a Lions perspective, and no guy in the chat, we always talk about the Lions. We rave about the Lions. Don't give me this. We only talk about their opponents. The Lions have good blitz answer types. Amon-Ra St. Brown's one of the best in the league at working the slot, the middle of the field. And as you mentioned Ben Johnson is good at having answers. So Jared Goff is also awesome at avoiding sacks, getting rid of the ball. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta work in the middle of the field. I think those guys are going to be huge in this game because when the blitz does come, those guys are tough to cover.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that side of the ball I think will be absolutely fascinating. And then the other side of the ball, it's going to be a Nick Mullins game again, right? And it's like that didn't go great last time.
I thought he played well. I mean, look, he played well and had 2 terrible interceptions. All right, so listen, be consistent here. When Bryce Young threw, in week 1, because you like Bryce Young, you're like, we played well, but he had two bad interceptions. Nick Mullins moved the ball pretty well throughout the game. He had a disastrous red zone interception.
Yeah.
And he had the interception that moved 2.5 footballs.
Yes.
Off of a lineman's head and then his own buttocks and then back to the lineman. I get it. I understand that it happened.
Which was one of the worst interceptions anybody has ever thrown.
I understand, but those are extremes. It is, a guy like Nick Mullins needs to avoid the disastrous plays because when he just sits there, and I think it also showed Justin Jefferson, man, is so good getting open. He's always open no matter who's throwing it to him. He creates, he helps the quarterback, man. He helps him a lot. And so they have a chance to move the ball as long as Mullins doesn't make those disastrous mistakes.
Yeah. This game felt a lot like I said this coming out of that week. There were a few games last week where there was a lot of quarterbacks sort of throwing up passes that seemed more in hope than in expectation and getting rewarded for them. And this was a game where that was true on both sides of the ball, actually, in fairness. Jake Browning threw a couple of prayers to T. Higgins, but there were a lot of passes that Nick Mullins put out there where it's like, that doesn't feel like a great pass, and somehow it's actually ending up okay. Like the touchdown to Jordan Addison, where he barely picked it up off the ground and somehow managed to keep running and turn it into a score. Yeah, he did move the ball. I still don't know that it's a win versus having Josh Dobbs out there. Like, they're both not good quarterbacks, but at least Dobbs brings the capacity to turn any broken play into a first down with his scrambling. Nick Mullins has the capacity to turn any broken play into one of the worst interceptions you've ever seen. That doesn't feel like a net win, even if the down-to-down efficiency passing will be higher, and I'm not sure you can rely on it on that being the case. So, I don't know. I just they need Nick Mullins to not, screw it up, and I don't know that that's likely.
One more thing to highlight here. Penei Sewell, right tackle for the Lions. He's questionable. I mentioned on the review show, he's got a 93-plus run blocking grade this year.
Yeah.
On pace to be the second best behind Trent Williams in 2021 in over 10, 12, 15 years. So Penei Sewell's playing great, all-pro caliber level. And then the thing we've highlighted every week, the Lions need help rushing the passer. Aiden Hutchinson has 81 pressures. Number 2 on the team is Alim McNeil with 33. He's on IR.
Right.
So they need help. John Kaminsky's been like a good rotational in and out type of pass rusher. He's got 28. They need help. And I don't know what they're going to end up doing down the stretch here with some tough games. Vikings, Cowboys, Vikings again. Are they going to blitz a little bit more? Are they going to try to manufacture more pressure and some help for Aiden Hutchinson? Something to keep an eye on. But I love the Lions, the way they're playing. I think they'll have blitz answers for the Vikings. They've got the run game cooking with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, number 2 and 3 in yards per carry since week 8. I like the Lions a lot. Did I just unplug my mic? I hope not.
Are the Lions getting Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back, or is he just back practicing?
I think I just saw him answering questions and talking. I don't know
That's
that
what I mean.
he's coming back.
He's definitely back practicing, but I don't know if he's back. I don't know if he's playing.
I doubt that he's ready to go yet, but could be a big help.
Yeah, I mean, if they get him back, I think that's a big difference to that secondary.
All right, Lions favored by 3 here in Minnesota. Where are you going?
All right. This time I'll give the Vikings a shot. Maybe the next matchup between the two, I'll have a different opinion based off that. More based off that Flores-Ben Johnson matchup. I'm going to give the initial edge to Flores, and then I might walk that back the next time they play.
All right, I'll take Detroit to cover the 3 here in Minnesota.